Suddenly, a bright flash of light engulfs you. As your eyes adjust to this sudden flare, you see a pair of Couatls floating in front of you.
We were sent to test you. Steel yourselves, for the executors of the divine are upon you.
Roll initiative. Hello, and welcome to Tuna's Tales. For this entry of Pondering Monsters, we're going to be looking at the Couatl, a winged serpentine celestial. This video is going to focus more on setting up an encounter with these creatures who are typically lawful good. This of course means that I'm going to be using the creature's alignment as intended for this one, as well as pulling in some established lore that Couatls tend to be beings who carry out the will of divine and celestial beings. So, with all that out of the way, let's take a look at the general idea behind this encounter. For this encounter, we're going to be using 2 Couatls for a 5th level party of 5. This shouldn't be too difficult, but depending on any magic items you give in your party or homebrew content that you're allowing in your world, it could swing a little bit on the easier side. Other than that though, this encounter really has one thing that if we implement it can make it a little bit easier to introduce, namely a direct tie to the gods of your world for at least one character in the party. Reason being that Couatls are the executors of the divine. They carry out the will of the gods and protect places of power or oversee the fulfillment of prophecies. If you have a character who is tied directly to a god, then you can pretty easily include them in a prophecy for said god. Although, if no one in your party really fits that bill, you can still use this, just be aware that things might not flow as well from a narrative perspective. With that in mind, the Couatls can appear for the purpose of testing the party to see just where they're at on their journey. If the party wins, then they're progressing as intended and the Couatls can give them a reward of some sort. If they lose, however, then the Couatls would probably just give them some advice and let them know that there's still progress to be made. And that's the encounter in a nutshell. Couatls appear and the party has to fight them. So, if we're to run this, what are the big questions that we should know beforehand? The biggest question that needs to be answered here is, what is the prophecy or reason that a deity is sending these Couatls to test your party? There are so many ways to answer this that I don't feel like I can do it justice by providing an example, but I can provide you some questions that you should take a crack at answering. If you do, then hopefully by the end of them you'll have come up with the idea for a prophecy of your own that you can run with from there. These questions are, does your party have a MacGuffin that the prophecy talks about? Has your party started to uncover the central tension that your campaign is exploring? And what deity would want to test your party, and why? Trying to answer these with your campaign in mind should hopefully get you thinking in a good direction. Once you have your prophecy figured out, then introducing this encounter is as simple as having the Couatls whisk the party away from or show up to literally anywhere. They're executing the will of the divine, so the party can deal with things on the Couatls' terms for a little bit here. The combat that follows should be pretty straightforward. The Couatls have the ability to shape change into a beast or humanoid of a less than or equal CR, which in this case is 4. So, with that, if we limit ourselves to and look only at the monster manual, then the highest CR beast we have access to for this is the elephant, followed closely by a giant scorpion and an ankylosaurus. For humanoids, we have a larger selection. Starting at CR4, we get access to some of the were creatures, tiger and boar specifically, lizard folk like the king and queen, and if we drop to CR3, then we can start using creatures like the veteran, the knight, orcs, bugbears, etc. Since Couatls can change their form as much as they want, you should be able to put together a pretty interesting combat for the party. Plus, if the party takes out one of the shape-changed forms, then you can just have the Couatl turn into something else on their next turn. If you're worried about that getting a little old, then you can always just set a cap to the number of shape changes that a Couatl can go through. If the party manages to hit this cap, then you can say that the Couatl is satisfied and the party has passed their test. However, if you're more interested in running the Couatls themselves rather than random beasts or humanoids, then I would suggest taking a look at changing around the Couatl spell list as a start. For spells, Couatls don't have offensive options, so at the very least giving them access to something like Sacred Flame or Guiding Bolt is a good start. If you want more than that though, then most any spell from the Cleric spell list would work. If you're not keen on changing around the spell list, then they do have a Bite and a Constrict attack, but those are consistently the same and have some issues of their own that I touch on a little later in the video. The big concern at the moment is that just a Bite and a Constrict is kind of bland and might get kind of boring for your players. Once you're feeling ready to put this in front of your party, then you can start it off like so. As you're all traveling along the road, you see an object fall out of the sky in front of you. It lands in the middle of your path with a crash, sending dirt and small rocks up into the air. As the dirt and dust begins to settle, you can see what looks like an egg roughly double the size of a human head laying in the middle of this crater. As you're looking at this egg, it begins to crack open and a brilliant white light spills forth, blinding you all. As your vision begins to clear, you can see that you're in a perfectly white space that seems to stretch on indefinitely. Floating in front of you are two serpentine figures with feathered, multicolored wings. These creatures speak to you in your heads.
Greetings, brave heroes. We were sent to test you. Steel yourselves, as the executors of the divine are upon you.
In another bright flash, you see their forms start to shift and morph, and then standing before you are two huge elephants. Once the combat begins, you can just run the creatures that you decided to shape change the Couatls into. If you're using an elephant, then they would probably try to use their trampling charge as much as possible here by running into a character to gore them and attempt to knock them prone. If they're successful, then follow up with a stomp at advantage before continuing to run on while the target is still on the ground. A reminder here that attacks from prone are made with disadvantage too, so an elephant with the mental statistics of a Couatl probably wouldn't worry too much about attacks of opportunity from a prone creature here. Continue this until either the party is down or the Couatls are forced back to their original form and brought to 0 hit points if you're not using the limited shape change option I mentioned earlier. If the party does get stomped, then the Couatls are not out to kill them. Instead, they would heal them up with their cure wounds and tell them something along the lines of the following.
You fought well, but you have a ways to go before you are truly ready. Stay the course, and you are sure to weather the oncoming storm.
You all blink and find yourselves back at your cart. Seems no time has passed at all, and you're even still on the same path you were before. Though your recent encounter has left you with some questions, you can't help but feel a sense of peace somewhere deep inside. After all is said and done, if your party did well, you should reward them. And this seems like the perfect opportunity to bust out the charm options from page 288 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. These options allow for minor supernatural effects that are either one-time use or limited use. These are things like the Charm of Feather Falling, which acts as a ring of feather falling for 10 days before disappearing, or the Charm of Heroism, which grants you the effects of a potion of heroism once as an action before it disappears. These options are not too powerful in the grand scheme of things, and are a nice reward that isn't just magic items or gold. Something a little different that the characters might not be used to. If you want to make this more difficult or just run it for a higher level party, then there are a couple scaling options available to you here. The easiest to implement would be to simply add more Couatls. However, this has the issue of making the combats more complex by adding in more creatures, especially since these are spellcasting creatures. If you're not really a fan of adding in more creatures though, then consider messing with the Couatl's shape change ability, specifically by giving them access to creatures that they wouldn't normally be able to change into. Let's say you scale them up so that they can shape change into beasts and humanoids of CR 6 and below. At that point, the combats get ramped up pretty quickly. If you want to keep the amount of Couatls the same and you don't like the option of having them change into a different creature, because admittedly that is a bit of a cop-out, then you can always just buff the Couatls directly. When it comes to this, I'd start with changing around their hit points and or armor class. For their hit points, the max possible they can have is 143. You can go higher, but I wouldn't take that to a number higher than 200 at most. And for their armor class, I would say 25 is a good upper limit. In fact, if you're just trying to scale this for your stronger than average 5th level party, I probably wouldn't touch AC at all, as from my experience, the Couatl's natural AC of a 19 can still be a pretty tough number for characters at that level to hit. If that still doesn't seem like enough of a power boost to them though, then you can always, as I said earlier, change around their spell list. Couatls being Celestials means that it would make sense if you decided to give them access to the Cleric spell list. Clerics have a lot of good offensive spells, and all of them should be usable by the Couatl if you're deciding to go this route. Guiding Bolt isn't a terrible choice, but you could also just as easily add in Spiritual Weapon or Spirit Guardians as well. Spiritual Weapon would actually be pretty good here too, as the Couatls have a constrict attack that restrains a target if they fail their save. This would mean that the Spiritual Weapon has advantage on all attacks against the restrained target. Finally, I need to call out the Celestial in the room, specifically the Couatl's Bite attack. It has a poison feature that, while it has a relatively low save DC, could be problematic to smaller or unprepared parties. This is because if you fail your save against the poison, you fall unconscious for the next 24 hours. That's it. No remaking the save at the end of your turn, no immunity to the condition on a success. The unconscious creature can be shaken awake by another creature, but your players might not know that that's possible. So for options around this, you could always just choose to not use the poison condition. You could let the party know that they need to use an action to shake awake a creature should someone get poisoned, or you could just let the poisoned creature make a save at the end of their turn. The goal here is to use whatever option you think your table's going to have the most fun with. And with that, you got a good start on how to run a combat with Couatls for your party. No map on this one, as a simple white background will do, or you can use whatever map you have for wherever the party is already at. Something fun to consider though, if you do go with the white expanse option, is that if any of the characters or spell effects happen to fall off the edge of the map, you could just have it wrap around Pac-Man style. If this encounter concept was interesting to you, or if you don't think it'll work, then let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, if you like the idea of talking encounters in general, then why not subscribe and leave a like, as that helps me know that I'm moving in the right direction here. And if you're looking forward to the next potential encounter, then why not do that thing with the bell as well, so that you can get notified when that video comes out. Whatever you decide to do though, thanks for letting me talk at all of you. And until next time, keep pondering.